Here's a man after my own heart. Congratulations to Jaylen Brown and the Boston Celtics for winning the 2024 NBA championship. Jaylen Brown was not just the finals MVP, he was also the East Coast Conference playoff person of the year, I believe, something along those lines. Him and his running mate Jason Tatum, they bagged up their first chip being led by their point guard. Not led, but I'll say being directed, because everything begins with the point guard on the offensive and the defensive end. So shout out to Holiday. Why are you singing that song, Bar? Because Styles P is my top 3 favorite rapper of all time, and that's one of his top songs of all time called Holiday. And True Holiday is a real one. On this side of the channel, we don't call him Drew, we call him True, because he's a true point guard. And it was his defensive plays and his abilities to close out games and close deals and close plays which helped them bag that chip. It was Holiday. And unlike the previous point guard who played unintelligent at times, no disrespect to Smart, but rather than going to Tatum continuously and allow him to keep going to that step back 3 and then putting so much pressure on Tatum and they have to rely on that, Holiday said, no, this is not good basketball. This is stupid basketball. This is not smart. This is unintelligent basketball. We're going to share the load. We're going to now go to Brown. Tatum's off. We're going to go right back to Brown. Downtown Brown. Because he's always going downhill, getting to his spots, doing much work. And as other NBA analysts have already made mention, it was his impact, not through the stat test, but through the eye test. He was rightfully deserving of the finals MVP. As the mainstream media has already asked, they already asked this question: who's better, Brown or Tatum? Tatum or Brown? Who's going to close the deal? Who's going to close the game? Who's our go-to guy? Who's the new guy we're going to go to, or do we keep going back to the old guy? And the answer to that is very, very simple. Stop your whiny mouths and Holiday. The point guard, the true one, he's going to figure all that out. However, in this particular series, it was Jaylen Brown who balled out. And this is why we are now taking a look at the mainstream media and their plantation narratives. Because it was they who picked Tatum over Brown. And I know this is no disrespect to Jason Tatum, because he definitely played his part. Who was better, Jaylen Brown or Jason Tatum? That's not our question today. That's not our question today. That question has been exhausted. And we know why it has been exhausted. Because Jaylen Brown has propelled his play to another level that you can no longer ignore him. Very similar to Lamar Jackson and the Baltimore Ravens. I lie to you not. Take race out of the equation just for a moment. As difficult as that is, living in a caste system. But take race out of the equation momentarily, and I'm going to tell you also why they called this young man unmarketable. Because he cut the middleman out. He negotiated through his own intelligence his own contract. That's what Lamar Jackson did. They kept the money in their own pockets. They kept the money in the family. That's why they tried to shun Lamar Jackson this previous season, although he balled out. And then they finally had to identify and recognize what he was doing and gave him his MVP, because the numbers were, you could not debate the numbers. Jaylen Brown, similar. Cut out the middleman economically. And guess what he did? Went and balled out. See, when they gave him that $250 million contract, that $500 million, when they gave him that $500 million contract, they said, young Mr. Brown, sir, Mr. Brown, what do you intend to do with all that money? Jaylen Brown said something very unmarketable, quote unquote, very unmarketable, quote unquote. And he said, I'm going to resurrect, I'm going to restore Black Wall Street. I repeat, Mr. Brown said his intentions with that bag was he wanted to restore Black Wall Street. They said, okay, Mr. Brown, thank you, sir. You have a good day. Unmarketable. And then so you see on his shirt, the finals MVP, the championship guy right here, Jaylen Brown, he said, you can't see it because he's blinking, but this t-shirt says, state your source. State your source. This is why I say he's a man after my own heart. Not only does he bag up chips, plays both sides of the floor, but he calls out the foolishness at the front door. Now, who are you talking to, Mr. Brown, when you say your and whose source and whom it must be stated? State your source. Jaylen Brown made sure to have the last laugh at the Boston Celtics championship parade. Huh? The Celtics star wore a shirt featuring the phrase, state your source, a reference to a tweet that he sent last month after ESPN's Stephen H. Smith, the agent. Wherever there is trickery and tricknology and the underlying and undermining of truth and the disrespect of black Americans, black American ball players, Stephen H. Smith will be right there. Reported Brown was not well liked within the NBA. That's what Stephen H. Smith said. Agent Smith was out there saying, before they won the chip this year, he was out there saying that Jaylen Brown was unmarketable. Jaylen Brown was not well liked. And even if that was true, we understand the context as to which this caste system operates, and we understand why they would deem him unmarketable. Because we know for a fact he does not have plantation raccoon conversations. He does not operate at that low vibration. We know that for a fact about JB. Okay? And just like Holiday and JB, they gave much props to Kyrie Irving. We want to bring our attention to Kyrie Irving before we go back to Jay Brown just real fast. We did a video on the crucifixion of the Kai when the mainstream media tried to basically bury him, and so much of the media pundits like the Chuck and Jive Barkleys and the Whack Kill O'Neills. He's Whack Kill O'Neil when he's talking about anything outside of basketball. I repeat, he's Whack Kill O'Neil when he's talking about anything outside of basketball. When he was talking about the JAB and talking about anti-Semitism regarding Kyrie Irving, he was Whack Kill O'Neil. And Chuck and Jive Barkley, they both co-signed that nonsense. And you had other media pundits like Skip Supremacist Bayless and, of course, Stephen Agent H. There, he was always there. Secret agent, man, always putting that work in. Crucifying the Kai. Check my timeline. I did a video on that, but it did the juice bar so well. Like a nice glass of freshly squeezed juice, celery that is, and some kale and some kiwi and some green apple. It did my body, it did my mind and my spirit well to see Kyrie actually sitting before his open enemies and making them shut their mouths, silencing them in real time. He balled out, Kyrie Irving balled out so well, he got back to the championship. Unfortunately for him, he did not bring the ring back to Dallas. But him and Luka, they put them back on the map. They were balling this year. Much respect to the Mavericks and to the coaching capabilities of Jason Kidd. They did the best they could. But Boston just proved to be a bit too much. Now, the question by the mainstream media to divert the people's attention continuously regarding the Celtics is, who's the better ball player, Jaylen Brown or Jason Tatum? We don't have that conversation. Oh, before I continue on, shout out to Holiday once again, because he will answer all these stupid questions, and he also stood 10 toes down for Kyrie Irving, just like Jaylen Brown. When they tried to crucify him, these two men, Jaylen Brown and Jrue Holiday, they stood up for Kyrie Irving, as they should have. Good for those men. Good for those men. You're a champion on the court. You're a champion off the court. Good for those men. And shout out to Kyrie Irving. Now, the mainstream media, to divert the people's attention, will ask the question, who was better, Brown or Tatum? But there's one question they tend to ignore. We just bear witness to it in the head-to-head matchup between Dallas Mavericks and the Boston Celtics. And I'm going to tell you why they ignore this, because we understand the caste system in which we operate, and the media is only one tentacle of it. But the question here is very, 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 very simple. Who is better? Who is a better basketball player? Who is a better basketball player? Luka Doncic or Jaylen Brown? By the definition of player. one who plays the game. The game consisting of two aspects, offense and defense. And by that very definition, how can you argue to me, and I'm all ears, and then we can pour juice all day, I'm all ears, but based upon what I saw, I now clearly can say Jaylen Brown is a better ball player by the definition of player. But I want to know your opinion on this. I want to know, and not just your opinion, I want you to explain why Luka is better than Jaylen Brown. And I'm going to pour my juice and state my case, and I'll be brief and we're going to be done. I'll state my case. Evidence A. My first point is very simple. By the definition of what a player is, one who plays offense and defense, they play the complete game. I can't truly grade someone who only plays half of the game. If this was in the context of a classroom, someone who only does half of the work, you automatically start off with a 50, which is an F. You fail. And what reality do we live where half a player or a player who plays half the game is better or equal to a player who plays the whole game? What are you saying, Bar? I'm simply saying the stats are true in this case. Luka Doncic, he set a record for having the most blow-bys. He was a human cone out there in playoff history. Out of all the players that ever played in the playoffs, he himself had the most blow-bys, and the majority of those blow-bys were by Jaylen Brown. How can you be a better player when you can't defend the other player? How are you a better player when that same player is looking to defend me nonstop? Jaylen Brown is hunting Luka out there. When Luka has the ball, Jaylen Brown is on him. When Jaylen Brown has the ball, he's calling for screens so he can isolate himself to Luka so he can go one-on-one with him. When Jaylen Brown has the ball, Luka wants no part of Jaylen Brown. And when Luka has the ball, Jaylen Brown is hunting him, looking for him nonstop. Make it make sense. In what world do we live? Well, the points don't lie, Bar. He's scoring more points per game than Brown. He's averaging 30-plus points, true. But he's only averaging 9 points in the second half, which is poo. That's never going to get the job done. If you are what they said you are, meaning a prolific scorer that we've never seen before of all time, then you should be able to get your buckets at selective times. But because you're scoring and shooting your load early, leaving your teammates out early, icing your teammates out early, tiring yourself out early, you get beat 4-1 in the playoff series and a gentleman's sweep. And Jaylen Brown dominated Luka. You can't get around that. He dominated Luka. Although he scored more points, he takes more shots. For every 30 points that he scores, the team collectively has scored on him 30 times. Do the math. That's because they know he's a human cone. He's a defensive liability. Luka has the mindset as if I'm going to outscore, outshoot. That's his definition of outplaying. But that's the other side of the game. That's what Jaylen Brown understands. And that's why Jaylen Brown has that in his hand. So I'm all ears as to how can one argue that Luka is better than Jaylen Brown. I could go on for more. I might as well. I just can't understand it. In what world are we living where my eyes clearly see domination? If your best player gets dominated by another player, by the opposing player, or by an opposing player, the team that player got dominated, they now become subconsciously dominated themselves because they saw their best player just get dominated. It slows them down. It takes the team out of the rhythm. Not to mention the player who's being dominated, he himself is being taken out of the rhythm. They took Luka out of the rhythm. They took Luka's teammates out of the rhythm because Luka was their so-called best player, and he was being dominated. You can't get around that. I need not see the stats when I saw the entire game multiple times. And that's what it came down to. It was complete and utter domination by Jaylen Brown on the offense and defensive end, which now leads me to my question again. How can we now honestly say to ourselves that Luka is a better basketball player? And if you do believe that, then please explain why. I'm telling you, all the arguments which have been made, I have just debunked them. I have just debunked them. The argument about the scoring, no, not true. 9 points in the second half, no. Well, he's a better 9 points in the second half, won't get it done. Not to mention the turnovers. Well, he's a better shooter. He's shooting 22% from the 3-point field goal in this series. What else are you talking about? Because outside of scoring, we have nothing. And then we already made mention the type of liability he presents for the Mavericks on defense. Jason Kidd plugged all the holes. He performed all the tricks he could perform to hide the liabilities, the defensive liabilities from his so-called best player, which in my opinion is an oxymoronic statement. It's an oxymoron, if you will. How can your best player simultaneously or at the same time be a liability? It does not make sense. But that's what Jason Kidd tried to convince before the world. It was a great coaching act until this man standing before us, Jaylen Brown, gave Luka nightmares. And you want to tell me a man who having nightmares about another man is somehow better than that man? That man can't defend that man. That man's being hunted by that man. That man just beat that man in a 4-1 series, and you don't even ask the question of who's better, Jaylen Brown or Luka. I'm telling you, it's that man. He is the greatest. Bar. Slow down now, Bar. Slow that down, Bar. Slow down, Bar. Slow down. Poor Juice, slow down. Slow down. Say what it is. He is the best player in the world today. Juice.